Hello, welcome to our next lesson that we're going to have. Today we're going to be talking about rotations. And if you think of the word rotation, that means to rotate or turn. So we're going to be talking about 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, and 360 degrees. And if you look at the diagram that's on the front, if our original shape is this one right here that's at the top, if we turn it 90 degrees, that's like going 15 minutes on a clock. It's about a quarter of the way around if you think of a circle. 180 degrees would be at like 6 o'clock p.m. And then if you went 270 degrees, that's going another 15 minutes. So it's like going to the 9 on the clock. And then 360, of course, is all the way around. So that would be like being at the top. All right, so our learning target hasn't changed. We are still, when we're given a polygon on a coordinate plane, will represent a transformation, reflections, which is looking at a mirror image, dilations, which changes the size, either grows or shrinks, rotations, which turns the figure around the origin or the middle point in the middle of our coordinate plane, and translations, which we did yesterday or last class, which is slides. Okay, take out your rotation notes. You should have them in your binder from class. A rotation, as I said before, is turning a geometric figure, and that just means a shape. And for our problems, you're going to assume that it's going around the origin, which is that center point 0, 0 in the middle of our coordinate plane. There's two words you have to know, and that's clockwise and counterclockwise. If you think about a clock, I'm going to draw my fancy schmancy little clock here. We have 12 at the top, we have 3, 6, 9, and you've got these hands in the middle. The middle is our origin. The 3 and the 9 are our horizontal axis. The 12 and the 6 are our vertical axis. Think about it that way. But if you think about a clock, it goes in a circle. So when a clock moves, it goes this way. So that is what we call clockwise. So if it's moving to the right, it's clockwise. And counterclockwise means the opposite. So that would be if we're going against a clock, and that's going to the left. And I like to think of counterclockwise has two C's, and it makes the C when we go counterclockwise. Okay, as I said before, when you are rotating, if you go 90 degrees, remember with our coordinate plane we have quadrants. 90 degrees, the figure is going to move one quadrant, or 115 minutes if you're thinking the clock. 180 is going to move two quadrants. On the coordinate plane. And then if 270 is another 90 degrees, that's going to move another quadrant. So that's three quadrants. And then, of course, 360, you can guess, would be four quadrants. That's back to where you originally started because there's only four quadrants on the coordinate plane. The one thing I'm going to highlight that you do know is that you have to know the integer signs for each quadrant. Remember, quadrant 1 is here, and it's positive, positive. Quadrant 2 is here, and it's negative, positive. Quadrant 3 is down at the bottom left, and it's negative, negative. Quadrant 4 is positive, negative. And you can remember, if you look at the actual axes, you can see where the positives and negatives start and finish, and just think the first number is your x, the second number is your y, and you can figure out what the sign is for each. All right, for every 90-degree rotation, this is the rules. This is what you have to know how to do, and it's very simple. Don't make it very hard. And for this one, we're going to be going clockwise. For our example, it's not written here, but I want you to add it. For every 90-degree rotation, we are going to turn. Oh, sorry, not turn. Turn, or in this, you're going to flip the order of the numbers in the ordered pair. So if it was X, Y, then you turn it, so now it's Y, X. And then we're going to change the signs of the numbers to match the quadrant or the location after it's been rotated. So with 90 and 270 degrees, if I'm in the third quarter and I switch, then I've got to switch the order of them. But then if you think about it, if I've switched, so when I go here, it's going to be YX. But then when I switch it again, it's going to be XY. So with 180 degrees, when I move two quadrants, 180 and 360, you actually end up keeping the order of the numbers the same. You just change the signs. Okay, so let me show you what I mean by what we're doing. First of all, let's label our signs for our quadrants so we don't get mistaken. Quadrant 1 is plot positive, positive. Quadrant 2 is negative, positive. Quadrant 3 is negative, negative. And quadrant 4 is positive, negative. Now, with translations, the shape didn't change the way it was positioned. It just moved on the coordinate plane. But when we're rotating, if you're thinking about turning this shape, I'm not going to do it because if I turned this whole thing, it would turn the entire notes. But if you hold your thumb up to give me a thumbs up sign, and then you rotate it 90 degrees, so your thumb is facing to the left, that's a rotation. Your top of your thumb was up, now it's to the left. That's how your shape's going to move. So this point A is actually going to turn, this point right here is going to turn around this one. So it's going this way like a clock. So it is going to stay diagonally one block or one unit diagonally away from that at all times. So the shape, the way it is, what's facing the top of the coordinate plane is going to change because the shape is actually turning. So if we look at our original, what are the original points? I'm going to put those in black. So the first point A is at -1, -1. Point B is at -2, -3. Point C is at -1, -5. And point D is at -3, -3. And we know that because it's in the third quadrant, so all of my signs should be negative. So that's why they're all negative. -1, -1, because the third quadrant, both numbers have to be negative. Okay. If I rotate it clockwise 90 degrees, that means I'm going to move it one quadrant. Clockwise means I'm going to the right. So I'm going to go from here to here to the second quadrant. So I know that my signs have to be negative and positive. And remember what I said about the point A is going to rotate around that origin in the middle? So our rule says we're just going to flip the order of the numbers. So if we look, and I'm going to put this one in green, our first one, we had a 1 and a 1. So the numbers aren't changing. It's just 1 and 1. However, we have to match the signs of the second quadrant, so that first one has to be negative, the second one is positive. Now watch when I graph it, I go -1, +1, and I'm right here. And remember with translations, we labeled that with a prime, a little apostrophe. That's called A prime. And our B, we're going to switch the order of the numbers. So where it was 2, then 3, now we're going to have 3, then 2. And now we have to change the sign. So our first number has to be negative. And we're going to come up here and graph that. -3 up 2. And that is B prime. And I can connect those. Our next one, switch the order of your numbers. So instead of 1 first, I have 5 and then 1, and that 5 has to be negative. So let's go over 5 and then up 1. Oops, I gotta erase my B, it's in the way. So this is going to be my C prime. I can connect those. And then oops, I have to erase my B again. Okay. And then I'm going to draw my D. My D is 3 and 3, so my numbers don't actually change because they're the same number. But my first number is going to be negative. Negative 3 and then positive 3. So that's my D prime. And that's my B prime. Okay, so you can see with my new shape how A is still one diagonal away from the origin, and you can see how the shape turned, where A was on the top, now D is the closest to the top of the coordinate plane, and that's how we're rotating the shape. So let's continue, and let's show you what happens when we take the originals and go 180 degrees, and I'll do this one in blue. Again, 180, we don't have to keep or switch the order, because when we move 90 degrees, we switch the order, but then if we move another 90 degrees, we actually flip back. So my originals, my numbers are going to go back to the original position, and both of mine are going to be positive, because in quadrant 1, we're positive, positive. So we have 1, 1 are my first 2 points. We're going to go back to the original numbers, because if you think about it, I moved 90 and switched the order. Now I'm moving another 90 and switching them back. So I'm going to have 2, 3, go back to 1, 5, and then 3, 3. Now all I have to do is graph them. 1, 1, here's my A prime. I'm going to go 2, 3, that's my B prime. C prime is 1, 5. And then my D prime is going to be 3, 3. And then I connect them. So if you can see what's happening with my 180 degrees, it is actually reflecting or flipping over. It's a mirror image of what the original ones, but it's diagonal. So that's why what happens when you do it on the coordinate plane. So you can think it's automatically diagonal. And then the last one that we have to do, I'm not going to make you do 360 because it goes back to the original. We're going to move another 90 degrees, so which means I have to switch the order of my numbers again. We're going to be moving into the fourth quadrant, so my signs are going to be positive, negative. So my numbers are going to switch, so I'll have a positive 1 and a negative 1. My numbers from the 180 degrees are going to be 3 and then a negative 2. 5, negative 1, because I'm switching from 1, 5, switching the order, and then 3, negative 3. And now I'll have to do like magic. I get to graph it. 1, negative 1. My A prime is here. I'm going to do 3, negative 2. This is my B prime. C prime is 5, 1. And my D prime is going to be negative 3, negative 3. And I can connect them, and you can see my shape. So now you can see that the 90 degree and the 270 are just like the 180 in the original, where it is a mirror image and it's diagonal. And then the 360, if I flip them back, use black, you can see if I flip the order, I'm going to be back in the third quadrant, so they're going to be negative, negative. Sorry. So it would be negative 1, negative 1. Negative 2, negative 3, negative 1, negative 5, negative 3, negative 3. And if you look back at the originals, you'll see that you're back exactly where you started. So all you have to remember with rotations, every 90 degrees, we're swapping the order of the numbers and changing the sign to match the quadrant. It's not complicated. You just have to remember 90, switch, 180, It doesn't matter if you even remember that, as long as you can remember, well, if I'm going 180, I'm switching it twice. Okay, so rotation, like I said, it's like your thumb, holding your thumbs up. And if you do 180, it's like turning your thumbs down. So that's 180 degrees. And if any of you are skateboarders or you are snowboarders, they talk a lot about 360s. 360s is one full turn all the way around. So 180 is half a turn. And you'll hear them give all these like 700 and whatever 20s. Those are like multiple turns. So you have to know how that works when you are doing rotations, and it'll help you figure that out. Okay, so remember, if I'm taking this and I'm turning it 90 degrees means one quadrant. 180 degrees means I'm moving two quadrants. 270 degrees means I'm moving three quadrants. And 360, which you'll never see on your SOL, means I'm back in the original position. I put a picture of a clock here because I wanted you to remember, if you're going to the right, what direction are you going? You're going clockwise or like a clock. If you're making the C, then you're going counterclockwise. So in a nutshell, here's your rules. For 90 degrees and 270, you switch the order of the coordinates and then change your signs to match the quadrant. 180 degrees, you keep the order of the coordinates and then you change your sign to match the quadrant that you end up. That's all you have to remember, or you can just simply remember that every 90 degrees I'm switching the order, they're changing places. Okay, let's do one more example, and then we will turn you guys loose on your Edmodo quiz. So for this one, the original shape, let's do the original shape, is 5, negative 5, or sorry, 5, positive 5, because it's in quadrant 2. I'm going to go ahead and put up our signs real fast and get in the habit of doing this so that you remember the signs. So quadrant 1 is positive, positive. Quadrant 2 is negative, positive. Quadrant 3 is negative, negative. Quadrant 4 is positive, negative. Okay. Now, if I look at point B, it is at negative 7, 1. And then point C is at negative 3, 1. And if I'm moving 90-degree clockwise, that means I'm going to the right. So I will end up, if I look at my graph, I'm going from quadrant 2 to the right, so I'm going to end up in quadrant 1. So I know that my signs are all going to be positive, positive. And all I have to do is look at the numbers. I'm doing 90 degrees, which means I switch the order. So I'll have 5, 5, since I have the same number. That's not going to change. And they're both positive because I'm in quadrant 1. Instead of 7, 1, I switch the order and I now have 1, 7. And then instead of 3, 1, I now have 1, 3. Now all I have to do is come up and graph it. So 5, 5, over 5, up 5. Remember, always go over first. That's my A prime. B is now, instead of 7, 1, it's 1, 7. Over 1, up 7. And that's B1, or B prime. And then the last one is 1, 3. And that is my C prime. And then you just simply connect them. So my shape has now turned. So A is pointing to the right. And that's my 90-degree clockwise rotation. I'm going to let you guys try the 180-degree counterclockwise rotation. I will tell you that with counterclockwise and clockwise, if you're going 180, you're still just moving two quadrants. So if I move 90 degrees to the first, 90 degrees, another 90 would put me in the fourth. Remember, it's just going diagonally, so it doesn't matter if I move clockwise or counterclockwise. With 180 degrees, you're going to end up in the same location because it's two quadrants. And since there's only four, you're always going to end up in the same spot. So you're just to help you out, your points are going to be the same that you started with. So you're going to have A is going to be negative 5, 5, B is going to be negative 7, 1, and C is going to be negative 3, 1. And all you have to do for your Edmodo quiz is match the quadrant or the points for the new one after you've moved it 180 degrees. Good luck, and I will see you guys in class.